Dear punk capitalist, the goat of punk capitalism, Charlie Munger passed away from old age of 99 in the November of 2023. Punk capitalists everywhere thank him for his contribution to the world through his infamous wit and wisdom. In the must-read Poor Charlie's Almanac, the goat wrote about the psychology of human misjudgment. It is an iconoclastic take on human psychology that is barely taught in universities. At least not in an interdisciplinary way. By constantly inverting his questions, he sought to make good judgments by avoiding and collecting examples of bad judgment and its causes. All of human misjudgment is due to evolutionary processes that helped in our survival as early humans. These survival adaptations, however, move us further away from being rational thinkers. We aim to be aware of these modern world evolutionary defects and its antidotes to help make better decisions in our lives. It will also help us spot these misjudgments in others and the broader society so we can adjust our behavior accordingly. In this video, we will cover all 25 of these in a distilled form, extracting the main lessons to save you time. Before we start, please like and subscribe. Number 1. Reward and punishment super response tendency. Incentives are much more powerful than most people realize. Incentives can cause decent people in ordinary life to be driven either consciously or subconsciously to do immoral things by rationalizing bad behavior. Think about the used car salesman who sells you a lemon knowingly. His need to make the sale and earn the commission to pay his rent creates a huge incentive for him to latch onto every positive word you say and think of ways to counter your not so well thought out objections. The antidote here is to be skeptical and look at the incentives of the person you are dealing with. You need to know the basics of the trade you're dealing with. And double-check, disbelieve, or replace much of what you have been told to the degree that seems appropriate after objective thought. On the positive side, companies whose incentive structure for employees is aligned with the goals of the company can greatly improve its performance. Federal Express required all packages to be shifted rapidly among airplanes to a central area each night. Things were never smooth, and FedEx tried every trick in the book without any luck, until someone realized that it was not wise to pay their staff by the hour. Instead, they changed the incentive system to pay per shift and allowed the employees to go home once the job is completed. It worked. Humans tend to game human-built systems. I'm sure you have heard of women buying a dress and keeping the tag on and returning it before 7 days. They enjoyed a beautiful night out with the dress at no cost. Number 2. Liking loving tendency. It is built-in nature for humans to love and like other humans. When this happens, the lover tends to overlook faults and comply with the wishes of the loved one. This extends to other people, products, and actions. Liking and loving tendency also acts in reverse. If you become likable, maybe people are willing to also overlook your faults. Number 3. Dislike-hating tendency. Similar to liking-loving tendency, humans also are born to dislike and hate as triggered by normal and abnormal triggering forces in its life. This is evident in left and right politics, tribalism, cultures and political systems we do not understand. We ignore virtues of the things that we dislike and everything associated with it. We may even go so far as to distort facts to facilitate further hatred. This is a dangerous form of miscognition because its effects can be so extreme and widespread. Think of the polarization caused by the Israel-Hamas war. Mediation is difficult because the history and point of view from either side are so different. Number 4. Doubt avoidance tendency. This, in short, is the human tendency to jump to conclusions. We have evolved to quickly eliminate doubt. We would have been an easy meal if we sat around and hypothesized what those stripes are moving in the bushes. This ties in nicely to number 5. Inconsistency avoidance tendency. Do you know a stubborn friend that just won't change their point of view despite all kinds of advice and reasoning? When a conclusion is reached, a loyalty formed, an identity created, commitments made, it is difficult to change. An evolutionary reason may be that it led to faster decisions, and when in a group helped cooperation. It will be difficult to get things done if everyone keeps changing their responses. Issues easily arise when doubt avoidance tendency couples with inconsistency avoidance tendency. A member of the jury might assume an accused is guilty because of the way he looks. To mitigate this misjudgment, the legal process allows both sides to state their arguments for the case. This hopefully eliminates any preconceived notions and prevent faulty thinking to prevent wrongful convictions. But they still do happen. Possibly this was the reason for the wrongful conviction of the Central Park Five. The antidote for this bias was purposefully done by Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin famously looked hard for disconfirming evidence that could destroy his ideas. The mafia and other cults also used dramatic rituals and status roles to trigger this bias. The so-called made man. Sometimes damaging notions are repeated and is pounded into the brain of youth, leading to permanent damage. They live their lives with crazy ideas, Inconsistency avoidance tendency also creates a lot of good in society. A doctor tends to behave like a doctor and a teacher behaves like a teacher. It keeps our roles in society tidy. Number 6, curiosity tendency. This is just a tendency for humans to be curious. Number 7, Kantian fairness tendency. Kant was famous for his categorical imperative, a sort of golden rule that if we all followed will allow for human systems to work best for everyone. It's the unspoken rule of good behavior and is expected by other members of society. We give way in traffic. We line up to order food at McDonald's. People get hostile when these unspoken rules are broken. Number 8, envy jealousy tendency. Warren Buffett says that it is not greed that drives the world but envy. When things or food are scarce and another member of the tribe has what we need, a tension builds up inside us. This is probably its evolutionary origin. Envy jealousy tendency, while often taboo to talk about, motivates most of us. Keeping up with the Jones is common in most societies. We do not measure ourselves in absolute amounts, but in amounts relative to close comparisons around us. I don't compare myself to Elon Musk, but I often compare myself to my friends. It's joked that envy is the worst of the 7 deadly sins because it's the only one that is no fun. Number 9, reciprocation tendency. Humans do unto others what others do unto them. We do this through gifts, favors, and revenge. In many cultures, business deals are won through lavish gifts, nice dinners, or favors. A bribe of sorts. This was done by Fat Leonard, who relied on reciprocation tendency to win military contracts from dozens of top-ranking U.S. Navy officials. Tit-for-tat battles between countries occur due to this tendency. America bans the sale of advanced microchips to China, and China hits back with a curb on gallium exports, which are required for the manufacture of semiconductors. Reciprocation, in its more enlightened sense, is through business, which leads to cooperation and constructive conduct. Reciprocation teamed up with inconsistency avoidance tendency causes people to do what they proclaim they will do. In negotiations, sometimes one party will anchor a ridiculous request and then back down from that to the terms that they actually wanted. The other party will see this as a concession and reciprocate by agreeing to the less onerous term. This bias may also be the cause of guilt. To the extent that guilt has an evolutionary base, it is plausible that due to the mental conflict of reciprocation and reward super-response tendency. If you recall, reward super-response tendency is our response to incentives. We want to enjoy all the benefit but also feel the need to reciprocate. Thus we feel guilt. Number 10, influence from mere association tendency. This tendency reminds me of a very distinct trait of my father. He will pick the most expensive item on the shelf because he believes that a higher price means it is of higher quality. We are conditioned by triggers related to products or people. We tend to have a higher regard for people if they are well dressed, or even listen and believe a person more if they are more articulate. Advertisers use beautiful people to model their product because they want you to associate their product with a thing of beauty. Rolex endorses individuals at the peak of their craft with the slogan, "A crown for every achievement." Rolex is associated with success. We also have a tendency to believe the opinion of some who has had success in one area to be equally competent in a totally unrelated area. If you are like me, you also hate to be the bearer of bad news because we know that because of this tendency, we will be associated with the bad news and risk being seen in a negative light. A strange phenomena of this tendency is that it causes people to bite the hand that helps. It is shocking, but when a person is in a bad way, it may be financial troubles or sickness or anything else unpleasant, and someone who pulls them out of their hole easily because of the favor giver's fortunate state. Instead of reciprocation, the receiver of the favor may not only not like him, but also try to injure him, because the favor giver is associated with past pain. Number 11, simple, pain-avoiding psychological denial. This is when the pain is too much to bear. The cause of the pain is denied to avoid the pain. There was once a mother whose son flew over the Atlantic and never returned. Everyone else knew he was dead, but her hope for his return never waned. Everyone lives in denial with certain aspects of our lives, which usually results in terrible problems. I had a cousin who lost everything gambling in the casino. He believed that he had a system to win at the baccarat tables, and despite poor performance at the tables, he was unable to accept that his past wins was because of luck. Number 12, excessive self-regard tendency. We all know the guy who thinks he is good at everything. He will associate with people who are like him and hire people who are like him. He will often make bets with people far superior to him in games of skill in a foolish way. It is recommended that this man take an honest look at his track record to determine if he is really that good. On the flip side, it is good advice to never underestimate a man who overestimates himself. Another version of excessive self-regard tendency is when objects owned are valued more highly. This is common in my day job as a realtor. Homeowners often have what I call best house syndrome. They value their home as better and more expensive than their neighbors simply because they think have the best house on the street. Makes me laugh if it wasn't so difficult to convince them otherwise. This is also known as the endowment effect. Number 13, over-optimism tendency. Some of us are overly optimistic, especially when things are going well. We fail to see that a good run may not be permanent. Over-optimism is usually tied with simple pain-avoiding psychological denial tendency. We don't believe that the good run may end. To counter foolish optimism, we need to think rationally on probabilistic terms. Number 14, deprival superreaction tendency. Have you ever noticed that it hurts when you lose something? Like the fish that got away. We remember the fish that got away more vividly than those that we caught. Have you noticed that? Or how about when your dog growls or even bites you when you try to take away its food? Humans ordinarily react with irrational intensity to even a small loss or threatened loss of property. Love, opportunity, status, or any other valued thing. Someone I know tried to burn down his ex-girlfriend's shop because he felt the relationship was ending. What a nut. Ideologies, when threatened with competing ideology, can also cause insanity in the human race. This is because when threatened with a weakening or loss of their ideology, there is a psychological conflict where inconsistency avoidance tendency also shows up. They must maintain their identity and belief with historically sad outcomes. Remember my cousin who lost everything at the casino because of simple pain-avoiding psychological denial tendency. The next psychological misjudgment that plagued him was the immense pain of loss of his winnings. He had to try and win it back. If you're bored by now, wake up by smashing the like button. Number 15, social proof tendency. Don't be a sheep and follow the herd. We have all heard that, but it begs the question, why is there still a herd? In a comedic experiment, one professor engaged 10 compliance actors to face the back of the elevator. When the test subject enters the lift, she takes cue from the other 10 and also face the back of the elevator. The trigger for this tendency most readily occurs in the presence of puzzlement or stress, and more particularly when both exist. Both good and bad behavior are made contagious by social proof. Teenagers are genetically programmed to have more respect for their peers than their parents. There isn't much that parents can do about that. What parents may be able to control is their child's peer group. Some people have the ability to stand apart from the herd. Frank Serpico, a 1970s police detective, was nearly killed because of his resistance to take part in the mass corruption of the New York Police Department. You have to appreciate his strength of will. He bypassed the social proof wiring with its interaction of envy, jealousy, and deprival superreaction tendency. Imagine being intentionally poorer than your peers and disliked by them with your life on the line. Frank was immortalized in the film Serpico, played by Al Pacino. To counteract this tendency, we have to learn to ignore the examples of others when they are wrong. Number 16, contrast misreaction tendency. As a realtor in one of the most expensive countries in the world, I have become almost numb to six-figure increments when haggling over home prices. But it still bothers most of us when one cafe charges $7 for a latte, when all others charge $5.50. Our nervous system does not measure things naturally in absolute terms. Instead, we measure things in relative terms. It is common for a buyer and seller to move up and down in price by $1 to $200,000 on a $4 million house with little feeling of gain or loss. The swing in price can happen in a short 15 minutes, leading to a closed deal. But I still wait for discounts to save $12 on my pair of Chuck Taylors. Ben Franklin's most quoted aphorism is, "A small leak can sink a big ship." Tiny increments in relative terms tend to go unnoticed and can lead to larger losses in the future. Number 17, stress influence tendency. We all know that Pavlov trained his dogs to salivate when a bell was rung. But did you know that Pavlov's lab flooded one day and almost caused all the dogs to drown? The stress of near death for these dogs undid any of the previous conditioning done to them. The bell no longer caused a reaction. While some stress has been shown to increase performance in people, large doses of stress can cause psychological ailments like chronic depression. Cults are known to place their initiates under severe stress as a way to deprogram them from past experiences and align their new belief system with the cult's ideology. Number 18, availability misweighing tendency. We humans tend to use the information that is most easily recalled as the dominant impression on a subject. When spouses are upset with one another, they can't help but focus on the most recent spat. All the good that has come before is not easily recalled and therefore not used to smooth the situation over. To leave an impression, vivid images or storytelling are a good way to instill good memory recall. A checklist also serves as a good tool to ensure all less memorable factors are taken into consideration When doing important repetitive tasks like flying a plane, the most important point to remember is that an idea or fact is not more valuable just because it is available to you. Number 19, use it or lose it. We all know this one. Skills that are learned over a long period of time will be lost more slowly and will come back faster when refreshed. Information or skills that were crammed in for a test are often not retained well. Number 20, drug misinfluence tendency. Don't do drugs, kids. It clouds your judgment and may lead to a bad outcome. Number 21, senescence misinfluence tendency. This tendency with a complicated name is just a tendency for cognitive decline as one gets into old age. While it is difficult to learn new complex skills when we are really old, we can maintain intensely practiced old skills into our twilight years. Number 22, authority misinfluence tendency. We live in dominance hierarchies. Most groups have a leader, either elected formally or informally. This leader will have a major influence over the decisions of the group. However, this authority bias is not limited to leaders but spills into other roles of authority. It can be something simple like a 10-year-old listening to a teacher or taking your doctor's advice without question. However, it could be much more sinister. In the infamous Milgram experiment, test subjects were ordered by an authority figure to deal increasing levels of pain through electric shocks to an innocent party. The victim, who is an actor, will plead for the torture to stop. The authority figure, also an actor, will insist for the torture to continue and intensify. Most test subjects obeyed authority and continued the torture. The person of authority influenced the test subject to continue administering pain despite the angels of the subject's better nature. It is obvious how dangerous authority misinfluence tendency can be. Number 23, twaddle tendency. People spout nonsense out of their mouths all the time. The more articulate ones sound convincing when you first hear it. This, however, can cause a lot of problems, especially when other people rely on that information for important decisions. Think of the talking heads on the TV and YouTube. It is important to keep overconfident but ignorant people away from important work. Number 24, reason-respecting tendency. We respect a point of view more if there is a reason attached to it. We hear this all the time. NVIDIA is a good buy because they make the chips required for AI and AI is the future, thus failing to consider other risk factors like price and competition. To decide if NVIDIA makes a good investment, we learn better when we are given correct reasons as to why an idea is correct. Let's use the theory of evolution as an example. Evolution is a theory and not a law because it is hard to replicate it mathematically to predict future outcomes with certainty. It relies on random genetic mutations that are passed on to successive generations. If that mutation allows for the survival and procreation of that individual organism, we also become more compliant when we are given a reason on why we should do something. The next time you want to cut the queue at the airport, just tell the people in front that your flight leaves in 15 minutes. They will let you through because of reason-respecting tendency. You're welcome. Number 25, Lollapalooza tendency, the tendency to get extreme consequence from confluences of psychological tendencies. Acting in favor of a particular outcome. That was a mouthful. In simple English, it says that when multiple psychological tendencies act together in a similar direction, the human brain can turn into mush. The Lollapalooza tendency turned nice old ladies into torturers in the Milgram experiments, and crazy megalomaniacs into cult leaders. The success of the Coca-Cola brand is also because of a Lollapalooza. Coke's brand is often associated with good times like parties and sporting events. Coke can be bought almost anywhere. This takes advantage of the availability bias. Have you ever been to a restaurant where the waiter declares they don't have Coke and serve Pepsi instead? Did you feel that slight disappointment from everyone around the table? That is a mild version of deprival superreaction tendency. Deprival superreaction tendency was the cause of failure for New Coke. Although it performed better in blind taste tests, Coke drinkers felt betrayed when New Coke arrived on the scene and replaced original Coke. What do you think about Coke's secret formula? Could Coke's secret formula also be a factor in the Lollapalooza? Please let me know in your comments below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video or found it useful.